My name is Stuart Mora. My background is as a community organizer and a union organizer. I was with the union Unite Here for 13 years, and I had a bad mental health crisis during the pandemic because everything around me was crisis and death, to be frank. And so I stepped away, and the reason I share that with you is that I want you to get to know me, but also that's how I ended up at an immigration law firm. Very close friend of me and my wife came over to check on me as I was recovering, and we had a short conversation, and she said, you know, if you want to come work with us at our immigration law firm, you're more than qualified. Work whatever hours you want. Come on over. And I was at a place in my life where I just needed to start doing something positive and interacting with people. And so I went and I started working 2 days a week, and then it was 3 or 4, and I have little kids, so they allowed me to make my schedule around my children. And so I've been there. I was there for the last 5 years. A lot of the work, as I got healthier, the last 3 years or so, I was working pretty much exclusively with our detained clients. And obviously, maybe this isn't obvious, when you're talking to somebody who is detained, the family is as much the client as the client, because they're the ones paying the bill. They want to know what's going on. It is often their child, their husband, their wife, their parent, and so I think through that experience, this is prior to the current administration, it became very clear something that I really harp on now, which is that when we talk about ICE detention and deportation, we do not exist as individuals apart from a family, a community. Every person who I am interacting with, who is detained or deported, has other people who are reliant on them, whether that is financially or emotionally, spiritually, or both. And so as things changed beginning of last year, being in the world of detained immigrants and immigration law, the changes that we saw in February and March of last year were dramatic, drastic, and cruel. And I really stress the last word because one of the things I often point out is whatever you think about what the immigration system should be, the changes that have been made are intentionally trying to make life harder for any immigrant trying to go through immigration court, the due process that used to exist. I will be very clear, it does not exist now. We can talk more about that. We saw it, we were on the front lines. What I said to my wife in March of last year is I said, I can't raise our children with the values that we profess and watch what is happening now and not use this organizing skill set that I've had, a craft that I have honed over 20 years. I just can't. So I'm going to go organize, and mind you, my wife has been through 2 mental health crises with me that she would very clearly tell you are related to the organizing. I'm at a different point in my life, and she gave her blessing, and I started to reach out to friends, and we did, you guys probably remember the Kilmar Abrego Garcia story. That one hit me particularly hard. This is a man who was here with a work permit, a U.S. citizen wife, 3 U.S. citizen children. Whatever rumors went around, he has no convictions on his record. And he was here legally. He had what is called withholding of removal. And not only was he removed to the specific country he was not supposed to be removed to, he was removed over a court order, and he was put in a torture center. And it was that moment that I was like, well, if they're going to do that to a man with no criminal history and a whole U.S. citizen family, that tells you a lot about what this administration is. This is March of last year. And so over the course of last year, I got involved as a volunteer. Because of my organizing background, I was not focused on what are we going to do right now, what are we going to win. I was focused on developing the relationships, listening, what's breaking through to people, what messaging is working. We had a number of different public witness or public actions, and I was always playing with the messaging and, especially with the press, what's the press connecting to, right? What are people that I'm talking to, what are they connecting to? And at the same time, I was involved in a campaign in Marion County in Indianapolis. Our jail started holding ICE detainees for the first time in February of last year. So when I say holding ICE detainees, what I mean is, here in Wayne County, if somebody is arrested and they are undocumented, if they're arrested for any reason, they're there on county custody. I've been arrested just like any of you could be arrested. I'm in county custody. Now I'm released because I paid a bond or my case is resolved or they didn't file charges, whatever. You put an ICE detainer on that person, that's what happens, right? And so basically ICE has 2 days to come pick that person up. They're just held as a courtesy. This is the common policy across the state of Indiana and most of the country. What is different in Marion, that had already existed in Marion County. What happened in Marion County is that they started getting paid to house ICE detainees. So as we're watching families be separated, the unnecessary cruelty, keeping people detained for months at a time who have no criminal record, our own community is housing them, is participating in that process. And so I was a part of a campaign that was really launched probably April of last year. It really got hot in the fall, and we won in January. So there were 128 beds at the Marion County Jail that housed ICE detainees. There are now none. One of the things that I knew, because I interacted with ICE on a daily basis at the law firm, we knew from ICE that they were being told, they told us, we're being told to arrest X number of people, we don't have a place to put them. We always knew this was true. The federal government does not have unlimited detention space. That's why they have to rent it from counties, from states, and from private facilities. Okay? This is the bottleneck in their detention deportation operations. And the reason I say that to you is because when I think about these situations, and I think about 128 beds that we took from ICE, I think about that's 128 families that are not going to be in crisis because they don't have a place to put those people. Okay, that is a knowledge from inside of the system, and that is a strategy that we have chosen. I will tell you, because I interact with ICE detainees and their families every day and have for a long time now, it is so hard to be in deportation proceedings. Okay? It is like paralyzing. You want to know what's harder? Doing it while you're detained and your family's at home in crisis. It's way harder. It is the difference between this is really hard and I can't function. And so when we talk about why are we going after the ICE detention facilities, it's really twofold in my mind. One is we're trying to prevent the crises that we see with families, okay? And I'll talk more about that because there's ways to get involved. One is preventing the actual harm that's already taken place. But secondly, I am very clear-eyed. I know that this administration wants to put me in a jail cell, in a cage, however you want to describe it. And if you don't think that's true about you, you're lying to yourself. They're already saying people on the left, people that say they're against fascism, are terrorists. Okay? They're saying it out loud. So don't kid yourself. So part of the second piece of why I believe this organizing is really fundamental to pushing back against this rise of authoritarianism is, again, they only have so many places to put people, and they will fill whatever beds they have access to. And at some point, that's me. Okay, that's me. I had one of our volunteers laughed at me because she said, I was looking something up and I Googled ICE Carmel office because I was trying to figure out what was going on with that, and your picture came up. Yeah, I've chosen that. I've chosen that. I know that I'm a face. Partially I've chosen it because I have the community and the family support to weather that kind of a storm. But I don't want anyone in here to lie to themselves and say, well, it's not going to happen to me. Go look at what's happening in Minnesota and Ohio in the last week. And so those are the two pieces for why we're doing this organizing. So what does that look like right now? I was able to raise money at the end of last year to be organizing full-time. So I transitioned from working at the law firm to organizing full-time, okay? So we won the campaign in Marion County, and I said, I want to build statewide. The power in this state lies in the State House. If I'm going to build something, I want it to build statewide, not just in Indianapolis. And so we formed an organization, it's a 501c3 called the Indiana Organizing Project. That's my organization. I'm the only employee. There are lots of volunteers. We had to make a strategic decision about what are we going to do for our next campaign. And we chose, are people familiar with the fact that we are housing ICE detainees at the state prison called Miami Correctional? Yes. Okay. So this is a state prison that's about 5 miles north of Kokomo, in the middle of a cornfield. It is actually a functioning state prison. Our state said, we can do some renovations on the empty part of the prison and we can make money housing ICE detainees. The Department of Corrections Commissioner said, and I quote, we would not be doing this if there was not a built-in profit. That's his words in a public statement. So we're currently housing 600 ICE detainees in that facility. They have a contract that allows them to go up to 1,000 detainees. Okay? And I go back to what does that mean? That's 1,000 families in crisis. Over 70% of ICE detainees, over 70% have no criminal conviction on their record. They already got the worst of the worst. Okay? And I don't even oppose that. Because I actually have worked in criminal defense and I know what that looks like. Over 70% of the ICE detainees for the past 6 or 8 months have no criminal conviction on their record, period. They do not need to be in a jail cell. That is your tax dollars, and it is our network that has to go and support the families. So what we do right now is we've launched a campaign. Some of you participated in our most recent day of action. Back in February, we launched the campaign to end ICE detention at Miami Correctional. We have 2 goals with the campaign. The first goal is how can we prevent expansion of ICE detention in Indiana? If you're not aware, Indiana is being used as a detention hub. So a lot of the people that are housed in the detention facilities in Indiana are coming from out of state. Okay? That's how we function within this deportation machine. The first goal is to prevent expansion. We know they want to expand, and actually the most likely place that they are to expand is at Miami Correctional. They're at 600, they have a contract to go to 1,000. To date, we've prevented it. I don't know what role we've really played in it. It hasn't happened. And we were very clear that that's the first goal. And then the second goal is, yes, my new friend over here, Julie, right? Judy. My new friend Judy, whose name I can't remember evidently, asked me, do you really think we can win? Right? Is that basically the question you're asking? Do you really think we can win? I've been asked that question several times. So yeah, I'm pretty prepared for it. Yes, we absolutely can win. I'm going to start with the fact that that contract at Miami Correctional is a 2-year contract. Okay? This is not a forever deal. There is an actual decision that they have to make at some point. Secondly, that happened in summer of last year. Have the politics in our country changed in the last 12 months? Yeah. I would say the administration is much less popular. And after Minnesota and Chicago, ICE detention and DHS are much less popular, right? Things do change, and politicians blow with the wind, right? And so part of what we're doing, right, so we have this statewide campaign. We did a press conference with my congressman. He did an oversight visit. He comes out. He calls for the end of ICE detention at Miami Correctional back in April. We've generated 3,000 emails to the Department of Corrections Commissioner. And then on May 16th, we had a statewide day of action, and we had 29 unique actions across the state calling for the end of ICE detention at Miami Correctional. Why is that important? What we're trying to do is make sure that this is an issue. that it actually is something that the decision makers have to think about, and that starts with just building it out. When we launched in February, I was very clear, 12 to 18 months. It takes time to build a statewide campaign from scratch. But we're doing it. We've generated a whole ton of media. You're going to see, I think, fingers crossed, in the next week, we have several detainees, 2 of them current detainees, one who's been released and is home with his family, who are going to be featured in an NPR story about the abhorrent conditions at that facility. There is no medical care. We've had 2 people die. One of the issues that is unique to Miami is they've put actually dangerous people coming off prison sentences with people who are not criminals at all. So we have stabbings, we have assaults from the guards, because this is a maximum security prison. They're not used to being around people who don't speak English as their first language, who are not used to a prison environment, and they overreact. And I could go on with stories, right? But the other thing that's important to know about ICE detention is that a part of the administration's strategy is just to hold people as long as possible, no matter what, until a court actually tells them they can't. So people are no longer eligible for bonds. People are being held even though the federal government knows that they're supposed to be released until they actually file what is called a habeas corpus petition in federal court. And so you're talking about people that are being held illegally all the time in all of our ICE detention facilities. But here's the good news. People are standing up and fighting back. This campaign actually has inspired a group down in Clark County, down by Louisville. Their county jail holds ICE detainees, 150 to 200 beds, a lot of women. That's unique to that facility. They just last week launched their campaign to end ICE detention at the Clark County jail. Between the 2 campaigns, we're talking about well over half of the ICE detainees being held in the state. So it's how do we roll this back and prevent these crises from happening? At the same time, when I talk to a mom, right, whose husband is detained and who's got little kids at home, I can't say to her, well, it really sucks. Do you want to participate in the campaign? Like, they're in crisis, right? They're in crisis. And so we've built a mutual aid network that is really statewide. Formally has like almost 500 people as part of it, but also has informal networks around the state. And we've supported, we're at about 30 families now that we've supported over the last 5 months in one way or another, taking up collections of food and diapers. And what we say is the relationship first, right? So we have volunteers who take that responsibility. I am going to be responsible for this family. Building a relationship, accompanying them, walking with them, and the term that we use is that detainee and that family, we got to surround them all with love. Surround them with love, right? And actually what ends up happening, this may surprise you, it may not, it does not surprise me, people don't actually want to be victims. They want to fight back. So once we can help them get stable, they actually want to be a part of the campaign. They want to tell their story. They got to be smart about it, right? Depending on the specifics. But they want to contribute. You know who refers more families to us now than anybody else? The detainees and the families. Hey, they can help you. At least they'll give you some advice, right? And so we've built a pro bono legal team to support detainees, a mutual aid network to support the families that are impacted, as part of a statewide campaign to end ICE detention at Miami Correctional, which is now end ICE detention at Miami Correctional and the Clark County Jail. So that's what we're doing. We are going to be building towards a statewide weekend of vigil. We're still working on the name. You can work with us on the name. But essentially what we want to do is going back to May 16th, we had 29 actions. We want to have a weekend with over 50 vigils across the state. Right? And it's a weekend because if your congregation meets on Saturday, do it on Saturday. If you meet on Sunday, do it on Sunday. Do it whatever time you want to do it. In certain places, like I can imagine here in Richmond, what if there's 3 vigils and then everybody sort of marches or proceeds to a common location to meet up, right? We're thinking about like, how do you do it in a way that it's a big number, because that's the hook for the press, but then also we can create some visuals by people gathering, like meeting up together among different congregations. There's a lot of freedom in that. I'm here partially to invite you into participating in that. We're looking at August 29th and 30th, tentatively as the weekend. It is the weekend ahead of Labor Day, so it's not Labor Day weekend. So that is one thing. If you want to be a part of the broader statewide public campaign, I have my trusty little sign-up sheet over here, and you can sign up. We can communicate. We've been in communication about doing different actions. We can just talk about it that way. And then the mutual aid network. And if you think that we haven't had families in Richmond, the closest we've gotten is Knightstown so far. But we've had a family up in Goshen, South Bend, Evansville. It is not crazy that next week I get a call and there's a family in Richmond looking for help. So being a part of that mutual aid network, you are invited into that. It goes both ways, right? You guys can reach out and say, hey, we have a family. What resources do you have? A part of what we've done is build a whole network. Like, we know where the resources are. They're not broadcast, right? Anybody who's helping families experiencing ICE detention isn't like putting it out on social media. But we know who to call. And there are a lot of resources. So those are the different ways that you can be involved. That is the organizing that we are doing. And I feel very blessed that you invited me here to share with you. And I would be happy to take any questions about any part of that, anything related to it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm born and raised in the States, and I truly don't understand how this is happening. Because the Constitution talks about illegal detention, and it talks, I don't understand. How is this happening in America?
Anybody else feel that way?
That's the question.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Do you have an answer?
I do. I've thought a lot about the wealthiest members of our society and how they think. And I really think it starts there. Is people's, certain human beings' desire to concentrate power and wealth. And a part of that strategy is scapegoating vulnerable people.
But Trump and his associates they're doing things unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
He tore down the White House. How is he getting away with this? I just don't understand.
They have all 3 parts of government, right? They have the executive branch, they have the legislative branch, and they have the judicial branch. That's why. There's the checks and balances are not working right now. There's no checking.
I'll be honest, I think a lot more about what to do about it than I do about why it is. I go back to why did I get back involved in organizing, and it's because living under an authoritarian or a dictatorship, that kind of regime means that we're going to be poorer and we're going to live in a more corrupt society, and I don't want those things for my kids and my grandkids, and so I'm just trying to prevent that from getting that far down the road. That's really how I think about it. Yes, ma'am?
I did just happen to hear this morning on NPR that prisons all over this country are getting paid big bucks to know. I'm not surprised it's happening here in Indiana, but that seems like kind of an insurmountable problem. If the prisons are going to get money for it, they're not going to say no. So how you must be fighting this on on the judicial side and getting court orders to have them stop? Because I'm sure they're not gonna stop on their own if they're getting money for
A
it.
couple different ways to think about it. What you're describing, I'm going to go down to the Clark County Jail. And they asked me that question the first time I went down and met with the group. Very similar to this group. They call themselves Do Something Southern Indiana, but it's a civic organization, right? And they had some protests at the jail. And I said, yeah, that's nice. We're going to have to run a real campaign if you want to win. And they asked me but the money's already flowing. Do you think it's too late? And I said, well, we're in year 1. It's going to be a lot harder in year 5 when your county's addicted to the money. Yeah, they're going to make $3 million in the course of a year at that county jail on ICE detention. You're either going to say, I'm not okay with our county making money by harming innocent families and children, or you're going to say you're okay with it. So let's run a real campaign. And they launched their campaign last week with over 100 people, got some press, and they kind of lucked out because the current sheriff lost his primary, so they're going to have a new sheriff. And that new sheriff, it's much easier to say, that's my predecessor's policy, not mine, than it is to get somebody to turn over their own policy. So that is answering specifically your question. The state prison is unique, and I'll tell you why. One, we should have a lot of hope from the fact that they announced the closing of Alligator Alcatraz. It's a very similar situation. And the real reason that they're closing that is they did not actually get the federal money that they thought they were going to get. They'll say it, you can read the press and you can see a lot of different things. That is actually the real answer. And the same thing is actually happening here in Indiana. We invested $16 million in taxpayer money to renovate the facility. As of the end of March, we were down $18 million. So we had lost $2 million just on the operations side. So, that's only going to go on so long. Again, this is only a 2-year contract. It's only going to go on so long before there's going to be other reasons to oppose what we're doing. So that's one piece of it. And then the two other pieces, one, they're only getting bad press out of it, and we're going to make sure that continues to happen. Every decision maker I've ever known and dealt with as a union leader, and I've been involved in politics, you know what you don't want to have? A constant headache. You don't. Just think about your own life. When you're a decision maker, you do not want a thing that is going to constantly be a problem. So part of our job is to constantly make it a problem. But also, the conditions are so awful that the ACLU of Illinois is now doing an investigation of the facility around the assaults, the medical neglect, the overall negligence. The conditions are truly awful. And that's often a part of the puzzle, right? Is you run a comprehensive campaign. So you have a public piece, you got the faith-based piece. We've thought about a business strategy, and then of course, lawsuits matter. So I do, we do have to run a smart campaign, but I very much think it's winnable, or I wouldn't have picked the campaign. I'm going to go there, and there. You're first.
I have a question. When we did go to Indianapolis for a thing a month or 2 ago, and the talk was about Clay County, Brazil.
Yeah.
And we were hearing the horror stories there where they barely had room to sit down, they'd never seen the sun, they didn't see their families, they didn't get appropriate food. And there was an organizing group whose name I can't remember, do you remember Indiana Aid, who were trying to help out there, and were going there frequently to take food, to take, what's going on there? Do you know anything specific?
Yes, I'm a volunteer with Indiana Aid. We work hand in hand. They visit, so people don't know. You can all be involved in this. There are people in Richmond who are involved. I know that for a fact. Indiana Aid is a group. It's all volunteers. They visited ICE detainees, I think going back to 2019. Clay County, Brazil, Indiana, used to be the only ICE detention facility in the state. It is an awful place, and all the Indiana Aid people will tell you, we didn't think it could get worse, and Miami is so much worse. So they do visits to Clay County and Miami, and then we'll often stay in touch with people if they get transferred to other facilities. That is why, that group is why we get many referrals for the families, right? People who are detained and saying, I'm worried about my wife and kids. Can you help at all, right? That's one of the things that happens. And also because we have that contact, that's why we know about these medical neglect issues and the assaults and basically what I've said is that they're like, can you not do in-person visits because you're the one calling for the undevised detention at Miami Gardens? I said, sure. Like, we're going to feed you the information. So that's how we work, right? Is that I am in touch. I'm always saying, lift up the ones where we can be helpful. Lift up the ones where that story needs to get told publicly or in a lawsuit. So yeah, we work very closely with Indiana Aid. Back in the back.
What are your thoughts about Delaney Hall and the actions and protests against it?
I don't know all the specifics because I'm not there on the ground, but I do know some of the Catholic leaders that have been involved and the faith-based organizing that's led a lot of the fight. I mean, I think they are doing great organizing, and I actually feel hopeful that they will close down Delaney Hall. I think that about sums up my thoughts. Do you have particular thoughts you want to share?
Well, I was more asking because your organization, your method seems to be the paperwork side of things, like putting pressure on the courts, like doing it as a lawyer would, which I get. But then also they're doing frontline work, you know, dodging tear gas and throwing smoke grenades and all of that. And I just wondered what your thoughts on the different directions of the same goal.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is they are ahead of us on the organizing. And when I say ahead of us on the organizing, I mean if we can organize a hunger strike among detainees, you know, that's a game changer at Miami too, right? We're not there. I don't think that it's impossible. A lot of that starts with, you know, we see it, the detainees organizing each other. And I think that a part of what I was just talking to a leader today about it, we're running a training on Saturday. Anybody here is welcome to come. I'm happy to share the information. It's in Indy. And it's an organizing training, right? It's partially about how do you plan your own action. It's partially about how do you get more people involved and keep them committed. What I was explaining to the leader was, I said, look, we're going to do this weekend of vigils across the state, right? And when you think about 50 plus, well, that means 50 different teams had to lead each of those actions. And what comes out of that, and what we're already seeing, is that people are leading actions for the first time in their entire lives, right? Adults just like us, who are like, I've never done this, but I got to try something. Well, once you do one, you go, well, I know how to do this. So if you're going to get to a place where you're going to have, one of the ideas that I was just bandying about is, what if all of Advent and the Christmas season, there was a standing vigil at the Department of Corrections in Indianapolis? Right? That's going to get a lot of press. It's going to get a lot of attention, and if you have to go to work every day at the DOC, you're going to pay attention to that. Well, for us to do that, we have to have a lot of leaders who are like, I got one day. I got the 12th of December. I got the 14th of December. We're going to bring our team from Richmond. We're going to bring our team from Terre Haute. We got one day. It just takes a lot of leaders. And so what they're doing at Delaney Hall, going back to, they're ahead of us in the organizing. Well, they've also been organizing around that place for a few years, right? And so that's how I think about it. I just say they're ahead in the organizing. We want to get there. We want to get there in tandem with the other pieces. Yep. You were next, and then here, and then there.
I wanted to ask if there are any policies going through the courts is one direction. I don't know that in our state or in our county or in our city even we'd be able to get policy passed, but would you point to any states or any places that might have model policies that would make detention either not possible or less friendly
Well, next door, Illinois, does not allow ICE detention in their state. And that's a relatively recent change. So, I probably have a little bit more nuanced view on this than some others. I am not someone who says there should be no ICE detention, mostly because I have had clients who I'm like, you belong in detention. I'm just being frank. And you're gonna have to go through deportation proceedings, and somebody's gotta hold you, because you don't belong in society right now after what you just did. So I'm not someone who says we need to get rid of all ICE detention everywhere. What I say is, right now, we're doing way too much. And so it's how do we roll back what exists? And strategically, that's why we've chosen Miami, because it's the largest facility. Certainly, at this point in time, if I thought it was possible to pass a policy that ended ICE detention in Indiana, I would wholeheartedly support it. Politically, I think we are a long, long ways from that. So it's like, how do we take chunks out of it? And really, I'll be honest, like a part of what informs my feeling on that every day is that I'm talking to the families every day. I'm talking to the moms about how their kids are experiencing the trauma of missing their parent, right? So like, I'm just like, how do we prevent that? Can we just stop some of that from happening? Because it's so awful. And people are on the verge of homelessness, and their kids are, wetting the bed and crying at night because they don't know where their parent is. These are lifelong traumas. So I'm just very focused on like, how can we chip away at it?
I have a question going back to the very beginning of when you started talking, when you were talking about your own mental health.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's a lot of people who just don't get involved because they experience burnout. And there's a lot of us who organize who we get to a point where we're just like, I can't anymore. So what do you say to those people who are on the verge of burnout, who want to give up, but how do you balance between like activism and awareness, and also your physical and mental health as well? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I would say if you're close to burnout, take a break. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I really mean that. Like, I don't think that whatever happens in the midterms, whatever happens if we have elections in 28, like, this isn't going away in the next 10 years. I just want to be really clear. It's not going away. This idea of fascism that now is sort of almost mainstream as like a concept in our society. I remember being in 3rd grade and being taught about the Holocaust and Nazis and how it was very clear that is not a thing you're allowed to be. Suddenly it's back. So I think the first thing is take a break. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to step back. Where I'm a part of the Indivisible Central Indiana team, and one of my favorite people to work with is taking a step back right now for a few weeks. Like, we're a team. That's why you build a team. Hey, it's okay. You can step back. It's okay. We're a team. We built this mutual aid network. I want to lead this into the mutual aid network, Gypsy, because one of the things that we've heard is this kind of question. I was at a United Methodist Church last week, and this woman said to me, "This is just overwhelming, everything that you're saying. Like, is there anything that I can just do?" And we talked about the mutual aid network. And what's so great about the mutual aid network is we use a raise your hand system. So we're sending out something every week with a request. Sometimes it's multiple families. And we say, we got this family, here's the basic situation, they're on this side of town, who can help? If I tell people, and I'm telling you right now, if you leave the country for 2 months, you are no less a part of the mutual aid network. Because when you're here and you say, hey, I can help that family, you raise your hand. That's why we built a network of hundreds of people, is that no one person has to take on so much. And I think that is a big part of it, is continuing to invite people in and giving them little things to do. And what we found is people from our mutual aid network are now stepping into leadership roles and saying, hey, I'll be a distribution house. I'll collect the items. I'll be one of the people that's going to hold the relationship with the family, because they see, someone was just talking to me about this, which is, once people see that it's effective and it feels good, like we're a part of something and it matters to somebody, and that family is like really grateful and they feel loved, something more fundamental than like democracy. It's like your neighbor feels loved when they're in a really hard moment. Man, it felt good to be a part of that. How else can I help? And I do think that we have to find those little ways of building community and as we're chipping away at, you know, some of this regime that we disagree with. Yes, ma'am.
I was sharing, it's not a question, but I was sharing, I think it was just with you, Jill. And this kind of goes with what Gypsy's saying, but it's the opposite side. When all this first started, I went into a horrible depression. And I just felt hopeless. And what I did was I basically just joined all different types of organizations. I'm in a bunch right now, you know. And it gave me hope. It gave me community first off. And that gave me hope to keep going. If I did not, and I think that's where a lot of people are at right now. And I think that's why some people are talking about inviting people. I think that's where a lot of people are. They're depressed and hopeless. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can bring more people in to the community and give them hope, then, like you said, they'll see just one little action could help a family, or, you know, it doesn't have to be huge. It can just be one little thing. But I think a lot of people are just hopeless and depressed, and they need somewhere to go.
Yeah, community is the word that I come back to all the time. It's just feeling like this room alone, right? Just being together and knowing there's other people that feel like you, that share your values, and you can care about each other. Start there, right? And then when we do, you know, I'm very adamant about when we do actions, public witness, whatever term you want to use, that we do it joyfully. That we do it with music, and we do it with art, and we have some fun with it, right? Like, in the end, whether you get press or you don't get press, whether it has an impact or doesn't have an impact, let's have some fun doing it. And I mean that, right? I love when musicians get involved, or we had an artist who made these beautiful end ice detention at Miami Correctional banners. And when I thanked her, she said, "Oh, this is my contribution. This is what I can contribute." And I'm a big believer in, like, find the way that each person can contribute. So, but do it joyfully. Do it with hope. Do it with joy. Lean on each other. It's the only way to get through it. Did you have a question?
It's a mix of thinking. Well, I wasn't born here in the States, so I'm an immigrant. I became a naturalized American 2018. Actually was the first Trump term, so you can imagine when he was a candidate, and I mean the fear is, I mean not only my child was scared about me, like what is going to happen to me at that time, and I mean I now remember that I have permanent residency. And I never was thinking to go to the citizenship until Trump came to home. And I thought, oh my God, I have to be for my kid, you know. But I noticed a change. I noticed a change in my friends, in my extended family, in the way how they were treating me was different. And the comments, the hurtful comments. And now, well, when he was having a second term, it was like devastating. I mean, I literally have nightmares of ice coming inside the house.
Yep.
And I was fearing my own families. I work with immigrants. I work in the school with Spanish children, Spanish families. And I have 2 jobs, and I constantly in connection with them, because I feel that is the only way that I can help them. But there was a moment that I have people looking after me. They were so afraid that what are we going to do now? There was a point that I had to tell them that we have to continue with our life and trying to be happy as much as we could with little things like maybe a home and family with friends, you know. It was a time, we love to dance. We love music, we love celebrations. We love quinceañeros, bautizos, we love marriage, weddings, and everything can stop. And even we have this, like you pay and you see a band coming and we dance for several hours and kind of stop that. And so when we're stopping, we continue to have our celebration in our own way, like kind of private, you know. But it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of fear. And I was thinking, it's always in the back of your mind when they're coming, when they're going to get us, you know. In my case, I always think in different scenarios, like, what if they come to my school? What if one to take one of my parents, my kid? You know, like, what are we going to do? How we need to practice? I mean, my neighbors are, you know, afraid. And I told them, when you feel like you are not safe, here's the key. It's here. You want, you know, recreating your mind. This is what we're going to do. Why humans? We have to go through that. And one of the things that also I'm doing is I'm separating legally myself with people that vote and supporting this administration. And I'm very firm about it. I say, I want to talk to you because if I'm with you, I'll continue being your friend. Excuse me, why do you want to be my friend? And you literally want me out of here, and you want my friend, my family, whatever, whoever looks like me, being away. What do you want, immigration? Where is that coming from? Why this discrimination? But everything goes down to corruption because I see that in my country, I see that here. They spot a place where it's people that are vulnerable and that were able to fight back, and they're using all these detention centers to, it's all about money. It's so sad.
Thank you for sharing. Make sure we exchange information, because if something does happen to one of the families, I want to make sure you know you can reach out.
Yeah, I'm one in connection. I think it was one time that
One of us.
somebody from AIDS, and I'm passing the information to my family, to my clients. And I feel because I know she has her family, her husband is from my country. Can you imagine being separated from somebody that you love? I just, no, it's so wrong. But
Yeah, I'm going to share two brief stories just to illustrate a little bit of what you're getting at here as well. One family that we've been supporting, mom is a U.S. citizen. She has 5 U.S. citizen children and 1 U.S. citizen grandchild. She's generations here in the U.S. Married to a Honduran man who's been here 13 years, no criminal history. He was detained. Really, they were looking for somebody else, and they found him, and so he ended up in ICE detention. They had been in the marriage petition process for 7 years at the time of his detention. 7 years. Despite all of this, they have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at home. He was ordered removed 10 days ago. So she has moved her 2 children down to Honduras. I was messaging with her today. So that somebody is there when he gets deported to the country he hasn't been to in 13 years. She's terrified. She's terrified. That is one choice. Is I'm going to move my family to this place that I don't really know. She's terrified of kidnappings. Often people that have returned from the U.S. are targeted, even though she clearly has no money. Her sister had the same thing happen to her husband. She chooses to live in the U.S. during the school year and go back in summer. Do either of those sound like good options?
Not ideal.
That's what we're doing. We're doing it to U.S. citizens. And I think that is the story that I really try to stress. Not because I don't care about it. I mean, look, my life has always been around undocumented immigrants, and I love them dearly. And if it were up to me, I have different opinions than the majority of Americans. However, my job is to try to convince people that we need to change our policies. And I think one of the things that convince people in the middle is the fact that so many US citizens are negatively impacted. Spouses and children. We've supported almost 30 families, all but 2 had US citizen children that are directly impacted. That's one story. Second story is, I was telling Joe, before we started, I want people to recognize the moment that we're in, specifically with the Haitian community. We have a pastor up in Bluffton, Indiana, up by Fort Wayne. And there's a bunch of Haitians that got recruited to work in an auto factory there after everything that happened in Springfield last year. The auto factory reached out and said, we want some of those good employees. Great, it was good for them. So they moved up there, so they have this little community in teeny tiny Bluffton, smaller than Richmond. And this United Methodist pastor has befriended them. And they're terrified, right? They're in this all-white community. They're obviously the immigrants in this particular community. And some of them are living with removal orders. They're terrified to go back to Haiti. Terrified. No group is more terrified to go back to the country they're from than Haitians. So now the church, as a ministry, gives them security cameras to put on their houses in case to watch for ICE. That is really happening right now, today, in our state. That is your Anne Frank moment right there. People are actually in hiding. The church, again, is giving out security cameras as a ministry of the church so that people can protect themselves. That is the moment we're in. So I share those two sides of the story to be clear, things that we can organize around, because those are real things happening right here in Indiana this moment. Do we have other thoughts or questions?
I do.
Go ahead and then Ray. Yeah.
Do any of your volunteers with your organization, do they actually take families in and house them?
We have one family that has taken in a family. They showed up at the ICE office, mom and her 2 kids. They were homeless. They went to the ICE office and asked to be deported. ICE told them mom would have to be detained, the kids would go to DCS, and who knows what happens from there. So we got involved. We've been housing that family. Dad got deported last December. We're trying to help them get back to Honduras to reunite, but there's paperwork issues because one kid is a citizen and one kid isn't. That family is being housed. We have had other families offer. And I feel pretty confident that will happen more going forward. Yeah, so some of it has more to do with actually the family that is impacted saying okay to that. We have more volunteers that would do it. People are just kind of, they're strangers, right? I'm in a strange country, these are strange people. So, Ray?
I was just gonna ask about children and like non-citizen children and also the children, like how, I mean, you've kind of touched on some of it, some of my questions, but just as an educator, like I know how much it impacts children and how we should not, how important it is to protect the children and how we can do that.
Just love them. Man, I'm a dad. I just think about the kids all the time. It's the first thing I think about. The family I just told you about that got moved to Honduras, I went over to visit them with a journalist and spent a few hours with them, brought a special meal for the kids. They wanted to play soccer the whole time. And the mom said, that's the first time I've really seen them truly happy since their dad was detained. Because we were playing with them, and they wanted to give me gifts, and I went back to see them before they left, and they had drawn Pikachu pictures for me. And they, you know, the story that the mom told, she told it to the press, so I don't have a problem sharing with you, is the 6-year-old, she got in the car one day, she told her kids to buckle up like any parent would, and the 6-year-old turned to the 4-year-old and said, put on your seatbelt or they'll come to get mommy like they took daddy. So if you want to know how deep it goes, right? Imagine how that's going to stick with you the rest of your life. You know, the 4-year-old's been wet in his bed and having nightmares, like the things you would expect from kids who are missing their parent, whose parent just disappeared. So, man, love those kids. Just love those kids. It's so hard. It's so hard. I just hope it doesn't happen to the kids in your classrooms. Yeah.
there was a report from Trump's first wife saying that he had a copy of Mein Kampf next to his bed, and then he was constantly reading it. And if you look at what he's doing, he's following Hitler's ideas. And he even said that he wished he had generals like Hitler did. And instead of Jews, it's the immigrants. I don't know, how did a felon get elected? A rapist felon get elected?
All of us want to know that.
I don't have the answer to that.
It had to be about money.
Can I say something like to answer your question? Trump may have read Hitler. Hitler learned from the United States.
How?
America, as the country, from the very beginning, has been to benefit a small number of rich white men who owned humans as property and did not care what happened to the people that were living here before them. From day one, that has been how America has operated. Because as you said in the beginning, like, all of this is so that we created the first trillionaire. The system is operating perfectly as designed. If it was a problem, we'd have it where one vote was equal to one vote everywhere across the country. But no, money has power, land has power. We live in a system designed to make a profit off of human suffering. And all of the ills of the world, the Holocaust, the Armenian genocide, all trace back to what the United States is doing. So many of the problems of why we have immigrants fleeing their home countries is because CIA-backed coups and dictatorships that are destabilizing the voice of the people. So it's not that we are following Hitler. It's not necessarily like neo-fascism. It's that this is what America's end destination was supposed to be. It's going by the plan. You know, we are hearing stories of Anne Frank moments every day. We have secret masked police. They call them the Stasi, call them the Gestapo, call them the SS, whatever you want. We perfected those systems first, and we're just continuing that.
And then caution saying that it's just the U.S. If you look internationally, this is becoming a problem.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, it's invading bastions of democracy like England and Sweden and Northern European countries that have had more powerful democracies than we do, and it's invading those as well.
That's the most depressing thing I've heard.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not that cynical. I choose to be much more hopeful than that.
Can I say something on that?
You're welcome to say anything you'd like.
So, as a lot of you know, I'm a high school teacher at Richmond High School, and social studies, you know, history, and so I agree actually with a lot of what Ben said. But when I talk to my students about the difficult aspects of our history, I also talk about the inspirational aspects of our history. And what I think we have to remember is that it's not it's not one or the other, it's both, right? That the U.S. Has some of the most despicable history in like all of human history in terms of how this country, and before it was a country, treated human beings. But we also have some of the most inspirational, not just ideals, but also some of the most inspirational moments and even current realities. If you look around the world, we are the longest lasting experiment in a multicultural, a pluralistic democracy in the history of the world. That's something to celebrate. But it's just that we have to fight for that to not just continue, but to expand. Because it has never been just the fact of the Constitution or whatever. That could be a dead letter. That has only reached fruition by the blood, sweat, and tears of people like us.
What happened to the ICE officers that killed those people? Just, I mean, the woman was down on the ground and they just kept pumping bullets into her. What happens to these men that are doing it?
Factually, I don't know the answer to that question.
It sounds like nothing happens.
I know the gentleman that killed Renee Good is still working for ICE. Removed him to another location.
So I'm gonna, it's almost 8:30, so I will close myself up here. We would love to have you involved, whether individually or as a group. If you would like to join our mutual aid team, you can put your information on here, on this sheet. And I'll move the other one. If you want to be a part of the public campaign, like directly helping to build it out, I will put that one here.